I used to believe that nothing in this world was stronger than the bond between sisters. I also believed that if I loved enough, gave enough, I'd never be left behind. That belief took root when I was 5 years old, the day my mother first brought my baby sister home, wrapped in a pale pink blanket, her eyes shut tight, tiny hands waving softly in the air. Her name was Ruby. And from that very moment, I swore I would protect her, no matter what. We grew up in a two-story vintage steel house in the suburbs of Springfield, Massachusetts. Winters there were so cold the frost clung to the windows like stubborn roots. But I never let Ruby put on her coat alone. I wrapped her scarf, adjusted her hat, fastened her snow boots over her small feet. Always me. My mother, Jeanette, was sharp-tongued and had an opinion on everything, especially about the duties of the eldest daughter. My father, Martin, was more like a gentle shadow behind the curtain, always present, rarely vocal. Still, I never complained. Being the oldest, I understood. Carrying the weight came with the role. I learned how to patch a leaking pipe in middle school because Mom said, "By the time the plumber gets here, it'll be too late, Layla." I cooked every weekend while Ruby studied for her high school exams. I cut back on my own spending when Mom struggled with the electric bill, even sold the tablet I'd saved up for all summer to help Dad cover a surprise hospital bill. Then came college. Ruby was drawn to art, passionate about European painting and pre-Renaissance movements. Mom said that major was too dreamy and had no future, but I didn't agree. I believed if someone had a dream, the last thing they needed was for their family to extinguish it. So I switched from the MBA track to a more practical finance degree, landed a job at an investment consulting firm in Boston by 24. I sent money home every month, and for Ruby, I quietly covered her entire senior year tuition just to make sure she wouldn't have to drop out. She never asked why her scholarship account always seemed full. I didn't need a thank you. All I wanted was to see her graduate, smiling in the sunlight of commencement day. That was enough. Then, 3 years ago, on a Friday night while I was working late, my phone rang. The signal was spotty, but I still recognized the excitement in Ruby's voice. "Layla, I'm getting married. Jason just proposed to me at the Contemporary Art Museum. Will you be my maid of honor? I can't do this without you." I remember stepping out onto the balcony, looking down at the blinking streetlights below like tiny constellations, then smiling. A mix of emotion and innocence. I said, "Of course, I'll help you plan the most amazing wedding ever." I imagined her in a pure white gown, our parents in the front row, me holding her bouquet beside her, her eyes searching for mine in the crowd like she always did when we got separated in the supermarket as kids. I created budget spreadsheets, drafted timelines, even made a separate email account just for coordinating with vendors. I canceled a long-awaited trip to Europe and funneled that money into a deposit for a wedding venue in Newport. I also sent Ruby a handcrafted sketching set from Italy, engraved with their names on a wooden lid as an engagement gift. That season, my apartment looked more like a wedding command center than a home. Bridal catalogs cluttered the couch, a color mood board full of pinned notes and swatches hung beside the fridge. I did it all with the heart of a sister who held nothing back. I had no idea kindness could be twisted, that devotion could be labeled overstepping, that someday I, the one always ready to sacrifice, would be left standing outside the very wedding of the girl who once called me her hero. But that part comes later. At that moment, I still believed that if I just tried hard enough, everything would work out. My name is Layla Preston, I'm 31, and this is the story of how I lost a sister and then found myself again, in a way no one expected. That Saturday evening, I had just wrapped up a video call with a client in Seattle when my phone lit up. Mom calling. I hadn't even taken off my coat before I heard Jeanette's voice crackling through the speaker. "Layla, I just booked the venue, Millstone Hotel in Westboro. They've got a fountain and an outdoor balcony for the ceremony." I furrowed my brow. "Wait, You booked it? I thought Ruby and I were still looking at places around Boston. She said she didn't care, left it to me. I was tired of waiting. No one's gonna hold spots forever. It wasn't a suggestion. It wasn't a question. It was a done deal. I went quiet for a moment. My shoulders still ached from the day's work. Mom, I already scheduled tours for 3 places this weekend. I've got the quotes. Layla, you work in finance. Do the math. Millstone's offering 15% off if we book by March. Plus, we get a free honeymoon suite night. It's a steal. I didn't know what to say. It felt like being shoved off the chessboard before I'd even made my first move. In the weeks that followed, Jeanette inserted herself into every wedding meeting like a producer who had bought the script outright. I went to Ruby's place with a color chart and vendor list I'd spent a month compiling. But before I could open my binder, she was already flipping through a leather-bound book titled The Wedding Bible by Mom. Inside were seating diagrams, flower selections, and a menu of Italian dishes, her favorites. I thought we talked about white flowers with purple asters. Purple asters are too dull, Layla. I went with pastel roses. They make Ruby glow more. Ruby didn't push back. She just smiled softly, like nothing had changed. Things kept unfolding like that. The custom wedding invites I commissioned from a calligraphy artist in Vermont were dismissed for being too dark. The acoustic band I suggested was shot down immediately. Sounds more like a tea party than a wedding. Every time I brought something up, Ruby stayed silent. No approval, no defense, just silence. Then one night I saw Megan's Instagram story. Ruby and my mom at Magnolia's tasting wedding cakes. Ruby once told me she wanted to go there with me. Megan was picking fillings, giving notes on texture. I hadn't even been invited. When I asked Ruby, she just shrugged. I thought you were busy. Mom said Megan was nearby, so she dropped by. Nearby? You spent the whole afternoon there and didn't send me a single message? Things are piling up, Layla. Mom's helping a lot. I don't want to argue anymore. I kept supporting quietly. I paid the deposit for the jazz band Ruby loved, $2,000. I ordered custom seat cards with designs matching the lace on her wedding dress. I even prepared a secret wedding gift. A honeymoon in Bali. Ruby's dream trip. I picked a seaside villa in Jimbaran, complete with a private pool and local cooking classes. Total cost, over $8,500. I kept it a surprise, planning to reveal it at the rehearsal dinner. But the feeling of being left out kept growing. Ruby stopped going to Sunday brunch with me. Her texts grew shorter, then stopped altogether. I asked Mom, "Do you feel like Ruby and I are growing distant?" Layla, you always think you're right, but not everyone needs you to control every step. Not controlling. I just want Ruby to have what she truly wants. She already does, and you need to let her decide for herself. He gave a dry laugh. Decide for herself? Ruby hadn't made a single decision since Mom inserted herself. And I, the first person Ruby called after getting engaged, was now pushed to the sidelines, like a stranger, meddling in someone else's business. The final blow came one afternoon in early April. I got a bank alert about a charge, $1,750, for imported Italian satin tablecloths, charged to my credit card. I had never authorized it. I'd once lent Mom that card when she forgot her wallet on a trip with her old friends. I'd forgotten to remove it from the account afterward. No one called to ask. No one said thank you. I sat there in the quiet kitchen, staring at the invoice on the screen, a glass of water in my hand. I didn't even remember pouring it. Something in me just shut down. It wasn't anger. It was the realization that I was no longer seen as part of the family. That night, I opened my laptop. I canceled the entire honeymoon package, the villa, the flights, every refundable cent. I no longer wanted to be the responsible older sister. I didn't want to be used under the label of love. Monday morning, I walked into the office with a cold coffee and eyes still burning from lack of sleep. My inbox already had 17 unread emails, but my eyes locked on one name above all. Sandra Lee, owner of Velvet Whisper Bridal Boutique in Cambridge. Subject: Thank you for referring a new client. I sat upright, heart skipping a beat. Ruby had never mentioned anything about trying on dresses. According to our original plan, I was supposed to go with her. We even made a printed lookbook from Pinterest with V-neck lines, long lace sleeves, and modest mermaid hems. I opened the email, my hand shaking so badly I spilled coffee across the mousepad. Sandra wrote, "Yesterday's appointment with the bride's mom and cousin, Megan, was wonderful. Ruby looked radiant in the ivory lace gown. We think she may have found the one." I wasn't there. I had no idea there was an appointment. No invitation, no message, no explanation. That afternoon, I found myself at Ruby's apartment, like I was pulled there by something I couldn't name. Megan answered the door. "Oh, Layla, what a surprise." I stepped inside, my eyes scanning the room. The wedding gown hung from a metal rack, sunlight hitting it just right so the fabric shimmered like melting ice. Ruby was recording a try-on video on her phone, set up on a tripod, her face glowing in the dress we once dreamed of picking together. "You weren't going to tell me?" My voice was low but firm. Ruby turned, startled. I'm sorry. Mom said it'd be quick. I didn't think you were free." "Not free?" I gave a bitter laugh. "Ruby, you once called me at midnight just to ask if your resume should be on white or beige paper. I left a client meeting to take you to fight a parking ticket. You think I wouldn't show up to your wedding dress fitting?" She said nothing. Megan looked between us, sighed, and disappeared into the kitchen. "I didn't mean to leave you out." "Right. You just let other people decide for you, like everything lately." I walked out before she could say another word. The next day, I got another email, this time from the bachelorette party planners in Charleston, South Carolina. They confirmed a payment of $1,400 charged to my card for a spa day and brunch for the bridal party. A party I wasn't part of? I called Ruby. She didn't pick up. I called Mom. No answer. Megan replied with a blunt text. "You might not vibe with this group. Everyone just wants to have fun." A week later, I went to the wedding celebration, where I thought Ruby and I would give a joint speech, reminisce about old memories, maybe play childhood videos. But the screen showed a slideshow Megan had made, filled with photos of Ruby with Mom, Megan, and her new group of friends. My name only showed up once, faintly, in the corner of an old photo from our family trip to Maine 6 years ago. No one invited me to speak. I sat at a table in the back with Grandma and Aunt Mary. My mom was the main host. Megan cut the cake. Ruby smiled the whole evening. She glanced at me once. No hand squeeze, no gesture, no quiet invitation to stand by her like she used to, as if I had never mattered. When the party ended, I stood alone in the hotel hallway. Late summer air had begun to cool, and the glass panels reflected the chandelier lights like 100 eyes, watching in silence. I looked inside, Ruby hugging Mom, then Megan, then each guest, one by one. No one looked toward the door. My phone buzzed, a text from the bank, a charge of $950, deposit for a wedding photo shoot with the photographer I had recommended. The same photographer Ruby once said was, "Too expensive, we'll have to think about it." They used him anyway. They just didn't tell me, but they still used my card. That wasn't accidental. That was a choice, a system, a strategy. I stood in the hallway, arms limp at my sides. In my mind flashed an image of little Ruby, in her red-striped nightgown, hair messy, clutching her pillow as she ran into my room during thunderstorms. I once promised to always be there, to always protect her. Now she was surrounded by a whole new team, and I'd become a stranger. No one kicked me out of the wedding. They just slowly erased me from every frame. Quietly, consistently, ruthlessly, like the ticking of a clock. And it all began with one sentence. Mom just wanted to help. That Thursday, Mom texted me to come to the house at 7 p.m. with a curt message. "We need to talk about the wedding." No exclamation point, no emojis, no additional words. It took me nearly an hour to choose what to wear. Strangely, not to impress, just to feel right. As if dressing appropriately, modestly enough, might salvage something that was cracking in ways I couldn't define. When I walked into the house I grew up in, everything felt so normal it was eerie. Mom sat in the center of the sofa, Ruby to her right, Dad quietly in his usual armchair. Megan was in the far corner, hands folded neatly on her knees, like she was about to read the evening news. No one stood up. No smile, no hug. I still remember the ceiling light casting sharp shadows on Mom's cheekbones, like knife-edged steel. "You're on time," she said first. I set my bag down on the floor and nodded slightly. "You said you wanted to talk, but clearly it's not just you." "Correct," Mom nodded. All of us, have discussed your role in the wedding." I turned to Ruby. She didn't look up. Her eyes were fixed on a tiny crack in the wall tile. Like it mattered more than I did. Megan leaned forward, face blank. "Layla, this isn't easy," Mom continued, her voice so soft it felt rehearsed. "But the truth is, you're making things difficult. You're exhausting everyone. You're trying to control too much. You bring tension every time you show up." I inhaled quietly. "So this is about a few suggestions I made, or are you just piling everything on me now?" "Don't get defensive, Layla. We just want Ruby's day to be peaceful." I turned to Ruby. "Is that how you really feel?" No answer. My fists clenched. Mom leaned back like she'd finally arrived at the hard part. "For everyone's sake, we think it's best if you don't attend the wedding." No one spoke for a few seconds. Only the ticking of the grandfather clock echoed through the room, counting each throb in my chest. I raised an eyebrow. "What do you mean?" "You won't be a bridesmaid. You won't be a guest. You won't be part of the ceremony." I let out a dry laugh, the kind you make when there's absolutely nothing left to lose. "So everyone agreed to cut me out?" Megan adjusted her sleeve. Dad kept staring at the floor. Ruby stayed frozen. The room felt like dead water. "No one wanted this," Mom whispered. "But it's clear that you're creating division." "I'm creating division when you've replaced me with someone from outside and didn't say a word?" Ruby flinched at the word outside, but said nothing. I took a step toward her. "Just one answer, Ruby. Do you truly agree that I shouldn't be invited to your wedding?" Her lips pressed tight, her fingers curled at the hem of her dress. No sound came out. I nodded. "Your silence says everything." Mom stood. "Layla, this isn't about right or wrong. It's about keeping the peace." I lifted my bag from the floor, shoulders stiff like a pillar in a wasteland. Peace built on lies and exclusion isn't worth keeping. I walked to the door. No one called after me, no one followed. Just the dry, final sound of the wooden door closing behind me. Sharp, deliberate, merciless like a full stop. That night, I didn't sleep. Not because of regret, but because I had never seen things so clearly. It felt like every illusion I'd been holding onto had finally shattered. At 2:43 a.m., I opened my laptop, pulled up the travel agency email, entered the confirmation code, and began canceling the honeymoon package to Bali. Direct flight from JFK canceled. Oceanfront villa with private pool canceled. Sunset cooking and boating experience canceled. The total cost, over $8,600, was refunded after 2 rounds of verification. I transferred all the money into my personal savings account, an account that no one but me had ever accessed. Then I opened another banking app. I searched for every transaction tied to Ruby's wedding. Charges from Satin Linens, cake design by Mirelle, photography by Theo James. Each one was cross-checked, reviewed. Some charges I had never authorized, some orders I had never even seen. I took screenshots, saved everything. At dawn, I called the credit card hotline, my voice steady and firm. I'd like to report unauthorized card use. The user is a family member but does not have permission. After the call, I sat silently by the window, a cup of tea growing cold in my hand. Outside, the city was still asleep, streetlights flickering faintly. At 7 a.m., the phone began to ring. 3 missed calls from Mom, 1 from Dad, a text from Megan. That was petty, no one thought you'd actually go that far. A message from Mom. You're ruining everything. Your sister's wedding is not a place for punishment. A call from Dad, rare and brief. Are you okay? I didn't realize things had gone this far. Not a single apology. No one asked why. They only reacted like I was throwing a tantrum. By noon, I got a message from Olivia, my best friend from college. Are you free tonight? There's something I need to tell you about your mom. We met at the little cafe on Tremont Street, the one that still carried that old vanilla scent in the air and soft jazz playing from the corner speaker. I ordered a flat white. Olivia only asked for water, but her eyes weren't cold. Layla, I've kept this to myself too long, but after what happened to you, I can't stay quiet anymore. I didn't say a word. Back in February, your mom came to my fundraiser. She was very charming, but very intentional. I looked up. What did she say? She said you were struggling mentally, that work pressure had made you controlling. She said Ruby was putting up with her sister's impulsiveness. I set my spoon down. Who heard that? The whole hosting committee, the old principal's girlfriend, even someone from Keystone Bank? Layla, she didn't outright accuse you, but every word made it sound like you were unraveling. How long have you known? Olivia lowered her head. Since March, but I thought maybe it was a misunderstanding. Until your mom called me the other day and said you were tearing everything down out of jealousy. That's when I realized. This wasn't emotional. It was calculated. The air around me thickened like smoke. I remembered the strange looks at a company party, the hesitant questions about whether I was doing okay. I thought it was concern. Turned out it was fallout, from stories crafted with care. My mom hadn't just cut me out of the wedding. She was severing me from every relationship I had built over a lifetime. I didn't cry. I just gripped the coffee cup until it went cold. Olivia placed a hand on my wrist, her voice soft but certain. You're not crazy. You're not difficult. You're not too much. You're just the only one brave enough to call out what's wrong. I nodded. Just once. Enough to know I wouldn't be turning back. And deep down, I knew everything I once believed about family. It was time to re-examine it from the ground up. Saturday morning, I was arranging flowers in the living room when the phone rang. The screen showed a name I never expected. James Ellison, Ruby's fiancé. I hesitated for a few seconds, then answered. Layla, thank you for picking up. I know this call is unexpected, but there's something I think you need to know. His voice was low, tense. I sat down, my heart skipping half a beat. What is it? Last night, Ruby found a message thread on her phone between you and your mom, but the content was completely fabricated. The texts made it look like you refused to go dress shopping, called her wedding plans cheap, even said you wouldn't attend the ceremony. I went numb. I never sent anything like that. I know. We just checked. Mom, Jeanette, created a fake contact named Layla and messaged herself. She also deleted your real texts and blocked your number from Ruby's phone by forwarding your calls. I gripped the phone tightly. Where's Ruby? He's in the next room, crying. I thought you should hear this before we do anything else. A while later, Ruby sent me a message. Oh, Welts, it was short. I'm sorry, I was deceived. Can we meet tomorrow night? I need to hear the full truth. We met at our usual tea shop on Beacon Street. Ruby arrived 10 minutes late. Her eyes were red, her hair tied in a high bun, no makeup. She sat down, placed a canvas bag on the table, and said nothing for nearly a minute. I don't know how I could have been so stupid. I didn't interrupt. I thought you were avoiding me, and Mom, she kept showing me proof. Texts, photos, edited voice clips. I quietly opened my phone and scrolled to an album, screenshots of the real messages between me and Ruby, missed calls, completed payments, abused transactions, all organized neatly in a folder labeled Jeanette Manipulation Archive. Ruby looked through each item like she was staring at a darker version of her own mother. Mom said if I didn't cut you off, she'd cancel the entire wedding. She even threatened to call the press and say I had a breakdown. She told me you were dangerous, unstable, emotionally erratic. I took a deep breath, trying to suppress the wave of dizziness swelling in my chest. Does James know? James knows everything. He even encouraged me to face everyone in the family. I nodded. And let's do it, but not in Mom's kitchen. I contacted Aunt Caroline, my dad's younger sister, who had distrusted Jeanette since the 90s. Then I called Uncle Tom, my cousin Natalie, and Grandma Rose, the ones who had once been pushed out of the family circle for disagreeing with Mom. Wednesday night, we sat around the tea table in Aunt Caroline's living room. Ruby sat next to me, clutching the folder tightly. James leaned against the back of his chair, face heavy with exhaustion. When my dad walked in, he looked confused. What's going on? Is this some kind of family meeting? I pointed to the folder on the table. Take a look. And this is the audio recording of Mom threatening to smear Ruby if she didn't cut me out of the wedding. Dad didn't finish reading. By the third page, his hands had started to shake. When my mom walked in, cream dress, pearl necklace, she froze upon seeing the full house. What is happening here? Ruby stood up. Mom, everyone is here today to find out what you've done to me, to Layla, and to this entire family. What nonsense are you talking about? I opened my tablet, pressed play. Her voice filled the room, clear, cold. If you let her back in, I'll go public. Tell the press you're unstable. You want to lose everything? The room turned heavy as lead. My mom looked around, trying to catch a sympathetic eye. No one met her gaze. Aunt Caroline finally spoke, her voice calm. Jeanette, you've been doing this far too long. To my brother, to Layla, and now to Ruby. My mom took half a step back, her lips trembling. You're all misunderstanding. You've all been manipulated, not me. Dad stood up, slowly but firmly. I've stayed silent for too many years. But I can't sit here and watch you hurt, person after person. She turned to him, searching for defense, but his eyes no longer held the softness they once did. He had spent his life avoiding confrontation, but today he chose to stand. Jeanette, that's enough. Everyone here deserves the truth. I looked at Ruby. She squeezed my hand under the table, and for the first time in months, I felt something I hadn't dared to hope for. We might reclaim what we lost, if we start by refusing to let my mother control everything. No one in that room could keep a composed face after the recording played through. Mom stood still by the door, clutching the handle of her purse, spine straight like even the slightest bend might break her. Every gaze turned to her, but none of them were warm. Ruby turned to me again, gripping my hand beneath the table. James sat upright, hand resting on the folder I had prepared. Each page a slice of truth. Edited texts, exploited invoices, unauthorized account access. I looked toward my father. He was still in the armchair by the window, shoulders hunched forward, hands clasped as if in prayer. After a while, he looked up, voice hoarse. I used to think preserving peace meant preserving family. Turns out I was just feeding a crack that got wider every day. No one interrupted. He turned to me. I'm sorry for doing nothing, for not protecting you, for letting this happen. I swallowed, a lump rising in my throat. Then my mother spoke, her voice as soft and sharp as wind slashing through wild grass. Jeanette isn't the enemy. I'm the one who carried this family before you could even walk. James replied, Not angrily, but with the firmness of stone. No one denies the sacrifices you've made, but that doesn't give you the right to manipulate and harm everyone else. Mom glanced around the room, as if looking for remnants of support. Aunt Caroline, silent until now, placed her hand on the table. Jeanette, you've done this before, not just to Layla, to me, to others. But this time we're not backing down. Megan, seated in the corner, no longer carried her usual arrogance. She kept her head down, barely looking up the entire evening. Ruby stood up. She didn't cry, but her voice trembled. I used to think you acted out of love, but love doesn't make people doubt their own memory. Love doesn't make you feel guilty for asking questions. Mom didn't argue, didn't defend. She just looked at Ruby with hollow eyes. From today on, Layla will be my maid of honor, like I chose from the beginning. If you still want to be at the wedding, you'll have to accept. No interfering with the plans. No making decisions for others. No contacting vendors behind our backs. No texting on my behalf. The room thickened again. Mom slowly turned, her heels tapping across the hardwood floor, stopping at the doorway. You're turning this into a trial. I stood. No, this is a boundary. She looked at me one last time, then pushed the door open. The sound of it closing wasn't loud, but it sliced through my chest like a thin shard of truth I could no longer ignore. There was no victory, only the collapse of an illusion. Ruby returned to her seat, shoulders still tight. Can you ever forgive me? I took her hand, squeezing gently. You don't need forgiveness. You're a victim too, just like I once was. We sat like that for a long time, in a room that still held the scent of jasmine tea and the whisper of wind through the curtains. James ordered a fresh pot of tea. Dad poured cups for everyone. No one mentioned Mom again. There was no need. The truth was out. Those who needed to see it had seen it. What came next was up to each of us. 3 days after the confrontation, I got a call from Mom. No long speech, no tears, no pleading, just one sentence. I'll see a specialist. Caroline gave me the number. Then she hung up. I didn't feel triumphant or relieved, just a strange silence, like after all these years a final door had closed. In the right way. Rebecca kept her word. She texted every morning, no longer repeating apologies but simply sharing, picking the cake today, trying a hairstyle tomorrow, asking my opinion on flowers for the engagement. We didn't dive into old wounds. We stepped around them, like walking across ground that had once collapsed, slowly, deliberately, with care. I also scheduled sessions with a therapist in Beacon Hill who specialized in families with covert control dynamics. During the first session, I spoke exactly 31 words, mostly answering questions. By the second, I said more. By the fourth, I broke down just uttering 2 words, deserve to. Not because I didn't believe I was worthy, but because, for so many years, I had measured my worth through others' approval. If Mom was happy, then I was a good daughter. If Ruby smiled, then I was a right sister. If no one complained, then I felt enough. I began learning to say no, not to reject, but to protect. In mid-June, Ruby and James held an outdoor wedding on a renovated farm in Vermont. Mom attended, seated in the 3rd row, lightly made up and silent toward the organizers. She kept to the agreement. Even if her eyes hadn't softened, even if her smile remained sharp-edged, she didn't cross a single boundary. Ruby wore a long-sleeved lace gown, with lavender and baby's breath in her hair, exactly the style she'd emailed me about back in high school. Subject line, Dream Wedding. I stood by her side through the ceremony, holding the bridesmaid bouquet, listening to their vows with an unexpected peace in my chest. No bitterness, no regret. I wasn't the planner anymore. Not the silent supporter, I was simply the bride's sister, present, grounded, and exactly where I belonged. 2 months later, as summer edged into fall, Tyler proposed to me on a trail near Lake Winnipesaukee. No fireworks, no floral arch, just him, me, and a simple ring tucked between the pages of the book I'd been reading. I looked at him and asked plainly, "If we marry, who's planning it?" He laughed. "Not your mom, not mine, definitely not Megan." I nodded. "Then we're good." We agreed. No signing on our behalf, no bookings without discussion. Family meetings wouldn't be about what it should be, but what we want it to be. Rebecca would be my maid of honor. And Mom? If she wanted to attend, it would be under one simple condition, as a guest, not a director. When I told Dad about the engagement, he said quietly, "I'm proud of you, not because you're getting married, but because you no longer ask for permission to live truthfully." I've kept those words like a shield whenever someone tries to reopen the past. I don't need everyone to understand the road I've taken. I need them to know that from now on, I walk it on my own terms. No longer straining, no longer pretending to be strong, no longer shrinking to meet anyone's expectations. Layla's story is a powerful reminder that love should never mean silent sacrifice or enduring pain for the sake of peace. In her journey to break free from manipulation and redefine self-worth, she learned to set boundaries, heal healthy relationships, and let go of toxic expectations. Ultimately, it was her clarity and courage that allowed Layla to build a life rooted in respect, honesty, and intentional choice, rather than fear of rejection. What are your thoughts on Layla's journey and everything she's faced? Share your reflections in the comments below. And don't forget to follow the channel for more heartfelt, real-life stories about family, boundaries, and growth.